Take a look at your browser right now. How many tabs are open? Let's guess. There's an article on the 10 best morning routines to maximize productivity. There's a video review of the perfect hiking boots for a trip you've been meaning to take for 3 years. There are tutorials for a new language you were going to learn, a new skill you were going to master. Your digital life is a museum of good intentions. Now look at your bookshelf. It is likely groaning under the weight of unread or half-read books on how to be better, how to be more disciplined, more charismatic, more mindful, how to build a business, how to find your passion. Your notebooks and your hard drive are filled with meticulously crafted plans, multicolored spreadsheets, and detailed outlines for projects that are perpetually scheduled to begin next Monday, or on the 1st of next month, or as soon as things calm down a little. You are not lazy. On the contrary, you are incredibly busy. You are busy learning, planning, strategizing, and optimizing. You are busy preparing. In theory, you are more prepared to live a successful, adventurous, and meaningful life than any generation in human history. You have access to the accumulated wisdom of the entire world at your fingertips. You have become a scholar, an expert, a connoisseur of a life that you have not yet begun to live. This state of endless preparation is one of the most seductive and dangerous traps of the modern world. It feels like productive work. It provides the satisfying illusion of progress without any of the terrifying risks of real action. As long as you are researching, you can never fail. You cannot be rejected by a client you never pitch. You cannot receive a negative review for a book you never write. You cannot get lost on a journey you never begin. The act of planning gives us a feeling of control in a chaotic and unpredictable world. The perfectly designed spreadsheet, the flawless travel itinerary, these are beautiful illusions of order, safe and clean substitutes for the messy, imperfect, and often painful reality of actually doing the thing. But in the process, we fall in love with the illusion. And we come to the great central metaphor of this modern paralysis. You have become a master cartographer of a land you have never visited. You have spent years of your life drawing the most beautiful, the most detailed, and the most perfectly accurate map of the territory of your own potential. You know the names of all the rivers. You know the heights of all the mountains. You know the locations of all the hidden treasures and all the dangerous pitfalls. Your map is a masterpiece. There is just one problem. You have never once set foot in the territory. And what if the map has become more real to you than the land itself? What if the satisfying act of planning has become a subconscious substitute for the difficult act of living? This is the great paralysis of our age. We are drowning in information about how to live, while we are starving for the actual experience of it. And it forces us to ask ourselves the most uncomfortable question of all. Are you living a life, or are you just researching one? This state of paralysis, this preference for the map over the territory, is not a simple, personal failing. It is a rational response to a world that has become philosophically and psychologically overwhelming. To understand our personal struggle with inaction, we must first understand the invisible forces that have conspired to create this modern age of analysis paralysis. The diagnosis began over a century and a half ago, long before the invention of the internet, with the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard was obsessed with the terrifying nature of human freedom. He gave a name to the feeling that arises when we stand before the abyss of our own potential: angst, or dread. For him, anxiety was not the fear of a specific thing, but the dizziness of freedom. It is the vertigo we feel when we realize we can choose anything, and are therefore completely and totally responsible for the life we create. Now consider our modern condition through this Kierkegaardian lens. If he felt this dizziness in the 19th century, with its limited paths and scarce information, what would he say of our world today? Before making any significant decision, choosing a career, a place to live, a partner, we have access to a veritable universe of information, alternatives, and opinions. We can research a million possible paths. The act of endlessly researching your life is the act of intentionally staring into this abyss of infinite possibility. The internet has amplified Kierkegaard's dizziness to a deafening, unbearable roar. We are not just choosing between path A and path B, We are choosing between Path A and the 10,000 articles about why Path A is a mistake, the video tutorials for Path B, and the Instagram feeds of people who seem to be living a perfect version of Path C. The paralysis is a natural, defensive, and almost logical reaction. Faced with a million choices, the safest feeling option is to make no choice at all. And so, we retreat into the seemingly productive but ultimately circular activity of endless research. This philosophical dread is confirmed by modern psychology. The psychologist Barry Schwartz famously termed this condition the paradox of choice. His research revealed a devastating truth about human nature. While we think we want more options, having more options consistently makes us less happy and more paralyzed. The paradox works in two ways. First, the more choices we have, the more difficult it becomes to make any choice at all. We are overwhelmed into inaction. Second, even after we finally force ourselves to make a choice, we are less satisfied with it. Why? Because of opportunity cost. When you choose one option, you are simultaneously not choosing 100 others, and the ghosts of those other, potentially better, options haunt your decision, robbing you of any sense of contentment. The researcher is a person desperately trying to outsmart this paradox. They believe that if they can just gather enough information, if they can just read one more review or compare one more feature, they can find the one perfect option, the one choice so objectively optimal that there will be no room for regret. But this is a trap. The very act of researching all the other options is what guarantees their future dissatisfaction. The search for the perfect life plan is the very thing that prevents them from living any life at all. When we combine these two ideas, we arrive at the heart of the issue. The act of researching life is a uniquely modern and sophisticated form of what the existentialists called bad faith. It is the act of pretending you are not free. You create an elaborate and intellectually respectable excuse for your inaction. I cannot possibly act, you tell yourself, until I have all the information. But since having all the information is an impossible standard, you have successfully built yourself a beautiful, comfortable, and well-researched prison. You have traded the terrifying freedom of making a real choice for the intellectual comfort of analyzing an imaginary one. I am not just a student of this paralysis, I am a lifelong practitioner. My addiction was never to a substance, but to the clean, intoxicating, and ultimately hollow feeling of a perfect plan. For years, the act of researching my life was my primary way of living it. And one project in particular stands as a monument to this quiet and respectable form of self-sabotage. It was a business idea, an idea I was genuinely, deeply passionate about. It felt like my true calling. And so, I decided to approach it with the seriousness it deserved. I began the research phase. And oh, the research was beautiful. I spent months conducting market analysis, identifying my target demographic, and creating detailed profiles of my competitors. I designed a stunning branding guide and a flawless logo. My business plan was a work of art, a 70-page document with financial projections calculated down to the last cent for the first 5 years. It was a fortress of logic, a testament to my thoroughness. From there, I moved on to personal development. I read every book on entrepreneurship, from the classics to the latest bestsellers. I watched hundreds of hours of interviews with successful founders, taking meticulous notes on their habits and strategies. I enrolled in online courses on digital marketing, on sales funnels, on copywriting. I could speak with an impressive and articulate expertise on the industry I was about to enter. To my friends and family, I was not procrastinating. I was being diligent. I was doing my homework. And the feeling it gave me was one of profound control and intellectual mastery. The research felt like real work, and so it completely anesthetized the guilt of my own inaction. In the world of the plan, I was a genius, a visionary, a future captain of industry. And in the world of the plan, there was no risk, no rejection, and no possibility of failure. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon about 3 years later. A friend, in a moment of genuine and innocent curiosity, asked me, "So whatever happened with that business idea you were so excited about?" And the question hit me with a physical force. I went home, and for the first time in a long while, I opened the folder on my hard drive where all my beautiful research was stored. And the feeling was not one of pride. It was the feeling of looking at an old photograph of a younger, more hopeful version of yourself. I clicked through the documents, the spreadsheets, the design files. It was all there, perfectly preserved, perfectly logical, and perfectly, utterly dead. All of that time, all of that energy, all of that work had produced nothing tangible in the real world. The business never had a single customer. It never made a single dollar. It never even had a functioning website. It had only ever existed as a perfect and beautiful idea. And in that moment, a devastating metaphor came to mind. My hard drive was not an archive of my potential. It was a beautifully organized graveyard of unlived lives. Each folder was a different tombstone for a different possible future that I had meticulously researched to death. And the core, shameful, and finally unavoidable truth came crashing down on me. The reason I had never launched, the reason I had stayed in the research phase for so long, was not because the plan wasn't ready. It was because I was terrified of being a beginner. In the world of my research, I was a world-class expert. But in the real world, on day one of my business, I would have to be a clumsy, fumbling, and ignorant novice. I would have to make mistakes. I would have to look foolish. I would have to risk the one thing my research had so perfectly protected me from: failure. And I had, without even realizing it, made a choice. I had traded the messy, unpredictable, and terrifying reality of doing for the clean, safe, and ego-gratifying illusion of knowing. I had become a brilliant scholar of a game I was too afraid to play. To awaken in a library of your own unlived lives is a painful moment. The immediate temptation is to double down on the same old strategy, to find a new, better system for planning, to research a better way to be productive. But this is to miss the point entirely. The enemy was never your lack of information or the quality of your plan. The enemy was your addiction to the feeling of certainty. The path forward, therefore, is not about finding a more perfect map. It is about developing the courage to take the first step without one. This is not a path of trying harder. It is a path of rebellion against your own need for perfection. The first principle of this rebellion is to embrace imperfect action. There is a famous quote, often attributed to the General George S. Patton, that must become your new mantra. A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. You must burn this idea into your mind. The perfect plan you have been researching for years is an illusion. It is a fantasy, created in the sterile and predictable laboratory of your own mind. The real world, the territory where life is actually lived, is messy, chaotic, and gloriously unpredictable. It will instantly invalidate 90% of your beautiful theoretical plan. The first clumsy, imperfect, and perhaps even failed step of real action will give you more useful, truthful data than 100 more hours of research. That first awkward sales call, that first poorly written paragraph, that first fumbling attempt to play a new song on the guitar, these are not failures. They are the beginning of real knowledge. The goal is to shift your identity. You must stop trying to be a perfect planner and start embracing the messy, imperfect reality of being a practitioner. Of course, the advice to just start is simple to hear, but incredibly difficult to implement. The initial inertia, the psychic weight of beginning a dreaded task, can feel insurmountable. This is where we need a practical tool, a psychological trick, to bypass our own resistance. This is the 5-minute rule. The rule is this: you must commit to working on your most feared and procrastinated task for just 5 minutes. Anyone can endure almost anything for 5 minutes. You set a timer, and you give yourself full and total permission to stop the moment it goes off. The magic of this rule is that it lowers the stakes to almost zero. Your brain is not resisting the task itself. It is resisting the imagined mountain of the task, the endless hours of effort it represents. By making the initial commitment ridiculously small, you sneak past your own fear response. And once you begin, the law of inertia starts to work in your favor. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. The hardest part of any journey is the first step. The 5-minute rule is a way to make that first step as small and painless as possible. More often than not, you will find that when the timer rings, you will want to continue. Finally, you must directly attack the source of the addiction itself. You must go on an information diet. An endless, all-you-can-eat buffet of information has led to a kind of intellectual obesity, a state of being so full of data that you can no longer move. You must impose a conscious and strategic scarcity. The practice is to set a strict, aggressive, and non-negotiable deadline for any and all research. For your next project, give yourself 48 hours. For your next decision, give yourself 1 hour. During that time, you are free to research with intensity. But the moment the deadline is up, the research phase is over. You must then take the first small, practical step of real-world action, no matter how unprepared, no matter how uncertain you feel. This practice forces you to confront and accept the fundamental truth that you will never have all the information. Uncertainty is not a bug in the system that can be fixed with more research. It is a permanent and essential feature of a life that is actually being lived. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty, but to develop the courage to act in spite of it. We began this journey with the image of a beautiful and unused map, a masterpiece of cartography, detailed, accurate, and the product of countless hours of diligent research. We must now admit the final and most simple truth about this map. A map, no matter how perfect, has no intrinsic value. Its only purpose is to initiate a journey. A map that is only ever studied, admired, and refined, but never used to take a single clumsy step into the real world, is not a tool. It is a tragedy. It is a monument to a life of meticulous, intelligent, and cowardly preparation. The great choice that lies before you now is one of identity. Will you continue to be a scholar of life, or will you find the courage to become a practitioner of it? Will you be a critic or a creator? Will you be a cartographer or an adventurer? The profound and terrifying secret is that life is not a problem to be solved in the safety of a library or in the endless tabs of a browser. It is an adventure to be lived out on the messy, unpredictable, and often unforgiving terrain of reality. The goal, then, is to be willing to trade the clean, intellectual satisfaction of having a perfect plan for the rich, chaotic, and ultimately meaningful reality of having a story. Your story will be filled with wrong turns, with mistakes, with moments of failure and regret. It will not be as perfect as your plan, but it will be real, and it will be yours. The trap of researching life is a subtle and seductive one, and the first step out of it is always the hardest. If you are ready to close the book and start writing your own story, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. And now, you must make your first commitment. Declare your first imperfect action in the comments below. What is one small, real-world step you will take today on a project you've been researching for far too long? Your answer is not just a comment. It is the moment your journey finally begins.